in the heart of the fog-drenched hills of Yorkshire, where the trees whispered secrets and the wind never truly died, stood an ancient boarding school with no name carved on its gates, only a symbol burned into rusted iron, a circle of thorns surrounding a single, staring eye. They called it the Black Hollow School, and only girls who had been forgotten, abandoned, or deemed unmanageable were ever sent there. 16-year-old Elspeth Holloway arrived on the first frostbitten morning of October, her wrists still bearing the faint bruises from the handcuffs used during her last incident. She had set fire to her mother's wedding dress and laughed while it burned. Her parents, religious and ashamed, had packed her off without a goodbye. Elspeth thought she'd seen everything: psych wards, foster homes, lockups. She hadn't seen this. There were no teachers in the traditional sense at Black Hollow. Only women in dark veils who never spoke, only nodded. There were no textbooks, only handwritten grimoires left on the desks each morning, written in a language Elspeth couldn't read at first. Her dorm mates were just as broken. Girls with cigarette burns in their arms. Girls who talked to walls. Girls who didn't speak at all. And yet, every night, when the bell struck 13, yes, 13, they would gather barefoot in the orchard, beneath the bleeding moon, and chant. It started as a game, until the crows began to speak, until one of the girls floated, until one vanished and returned with eyes like mirrors. And then Elspeth found the book, hidden beneath a loose stone in her room, bound in skin, pulsing faintly when touched. It whispered things: her name, her fears, the secrets of the veiled women. It offered her power, but at a cost. The deeper Elspeth went, the more she remembered something she shouldn't have, that she had been here before. That this school didn't just take wayward girls, it made them. It reshaped them, soul by soul, into something else, something older. Witchcraft wasn't taught. It was inherited, passed on in blood, in trauma, in silence. And now, Elspeth had a choice: burn the school down again, or take her place at the head of the coven. Elspeth tried to forget what she saw in the mirror that night. It wasn't her reflection staring back, but something older. Her face, but hollowed. Her eyes, but black as pitch, flickering like candlelight trapped behind glass. It had smiled at her, not kindly. The book had opened itself while she stared. Pages flipped with invisible fingers, revealing a ritual scrawled in red ink that shimmered in the dark. The hollowing rite. Elspeth tore her gaze away and slammed the book shut. But that night, her dreams bled into waking. She found herself sleepwalking to the edge of the school's lake, where the water was so still it reflected stars that weren't in the sky. There, standing half-submerged, was Lila, her roommate who had disappeared 3 nights ago. Her skin was soaked, her dress clinging like a funeral shroud, her mouth moving silently. But no sound came out. When Elspeth tried to reach her, the water turned to ink. The reflection shattered. She woke in bed, her feet muddy. The next day, the veiled women served tea that smelled faintly of soil and salt. None of the other girls drank it, but no one dared ask why. One of the new girls, a wide-eyed 12-year-old named Clara, took a sip. By evening, her fingernails had turned black, and her laughter echoed through the empty corridors long after lights out. Elspeth avoided the tea. Instead, she began copying pages from the book into her journal, translating, decoding, comparing the runes carved into the school's stone walls. She started seeing patterns. Symbols repeated under the floorboards, scratched onto tree bark, even stitched into the lining of the uniforms they wore. Black Hollow wasn't just a school. It was a spell, a living, breathing one. And the girls? They were the ingredients. In the attic, Elspeth discovered a locked door marked with a sigil she had only seen once, on her own wrist, burned there the night she arrived. She whispered the words she'd read in the margins of the book. The lock melted. Inside, mirrors. Hundreds, all covered in white cloths. One was uncovered, and inside it, she saw not herself but dozens of girls, some sobbing, some screaming, some simply staring, all of them reaching toward her. One of them mouthed her name. Not Elspeth, but something deeper, something unspoken. From behind, a voice rasped, "You're not ready." It was one of the veiled women, except her veil had slipped, and she had no face. Elspeth stumbled backward, her breath shallow, heart pounding like war drums inside her chest. The faceless woman didn't move, didn't chase, didn't speak again. She simply stood there, veil at her feet, head tilted as if listening to something Elspeth could not hear. Behind her, the mirror began to hum. It wasn't a sound exactly, it was pressure. A weight behind her eyes, inside her teeth, down her spine. The uncovered glass pulsed with a sickly amber light, and the girls within it started to blur together, melting and reforming like wax figures under flame. Elspeth tried to run, but her legs were leaden. The book, somehow it was in her hands again. Open, pages fluttering in a wind that wasn't there. And then the mirror spoke. Not in words, but memories. Flash images. A girl, blonde, bleeding from the ears. A tower with no windows. A circle of stones underground. A scream swallowed by the roots of an ancient tree. Elspeth collapsed, sobbing. And that's when she saw her. Among the reflections stood a girl with her same eyes, same hands, same scar above the brow, but she was older, hardened, wearing robes of ash, marked with the sigils of command. The girl raised her hand slowly and drew her thumb across her throat. A warning, or an invitation. Back in the dormitories, nothing was the same. Clara hadn't been seen since the tea. Her bed remained perfectly made, her suitcase gone, as if she'd never arrived. The other girls avoided Elspeth now, not out of fear, but reverence. They moved aside in the halls. Some left small offerings on her bed, crow feathers, teeth, dried flowers stitched with black thread. The book grew heavier by the day. It whispered now, even in daylight. It hummed when she neared the stone well at the center of the courtyard, the one sealed with a rusted grate and guarded by a statue of 3 blindfolded girls. She asked Iris, the oldest of the students, what lay beneath. Iris only smiled. That's where we bury our names. That night, Elspeth dreamed of fire again, but this time, she was not the one who lit it, she was inside it, and around her stood women in veils, chanting in reverse. As the flames consumed her, she felt herself split open, not in pain, but in revelation. There was a name in her blood, a name the world had tried to erase. Asherah. She woke with the taste of ash on her tongue, and a sigil burned into her palm. It was the same symbol that now marked the door to the headmistress's office, an office no one had entered in 50 years. Until now. The door creaked open on its own as Elspeth approached. The smell inside was of rain and rot. Portraits watched her with milky eyes. On the desk, a ledger, bound in pale leather, filled with names. Every name had 2 dates beside it, a birth and a disappearance. Elspeth turned to the last page. Her fingers trembled. Her name was already written, but the second date was tomorrow. Elspeth stared at the second date beside her name. Tomorrow, August 7th. She flipped the pages backward in the ledger. Dozens of names. Hundreds. All girls. All wayward. All vanished from the world on the same day they turned 17. Most were marked reclaimed. A few were crossed out entirely, the ink slashed with fury, as if whoever wrote them had tried to forget. Only 3 names were circled in gold. One of them was hers. Down the hallway, the bell struck 13. No one else seemed to hear it, but Elspeth's bones did. Her teeth ached with each toll. She gripped the book tighter, breath shallow. The air changed. The corridor elongated, shadows stretching, light bulbs flickering like dying stars. As she turned back toward the dormitories, she passed a window that hadn't been there before. Through it, she saw the orchard. But it wasn't night outside. It wasn't the season. Beneath a copper sky, dozens of girls danced in a spiral, chanting, twirling in tattered gowns soaked with moss and blood. In the center stood a tree older than the world, its branches wrapped in hair. At its roots, a girl knelt, blindfolded, hands tied. It was Elspeth, or it had been once. The next morning, she found a dress laid out on her bed, long silver, stitched with the same runes that lined the book's pages. No one else seemed to see it. The other girls passed by her bed without a glance, without a word. Even her reflection didn't match her anymore. It moved slower, smiled when she didn't. She tried to leave the school, walked the gravel road past the gates, past the thorn-marked trees. But an hour later, she was back in her room. No footsteps, no memory of turning around, just the book on her lap, and her hands bleeding where she'd dug her nails into her palms. That evening, Iris returned. She hadn't been seen in days. Her hair had turned white. Her eyes were ringed with ink, or shadow, or something deeper. She didn't speak, but she handed Elspeth the small key wrapped in raven feathers. No explanation, no comfort, just one whispered sentence, before she disappeared again into the east wing. When the moon dies, unlock the girl beneath the school. Elspeth waited, and that night, as the moon waned into blackness, completely gone from the sky, she descended into the cellar beneath the laundry room, using the book as a lantern. Its pages now glowed with an internal light, as if aware of what was coming. At the end of a passage too narrow for her shoulders, she found a trapdoor. The key fit perfectly. Beneath it, stairs that spiraled into the earth. Wet stone, murmuring voices, heat that smelled of dust and bone. She walked for what felt like hours. The deeper she went, the more the stone began to look like flesh, pulsing, veined warm. At the bottom, in a chamber lit by candles that never melted, was a coffin of glass. Inside it a girl, or the idea of a girl. Perfect, unmoving, skin too smooth, lips too red, eyes open but unseeing. Elspeth felt her throat close, because the girl inside the glass was Elspeth, or the part of her that had once been. Elspeth couldn't move. Her knees buckled, but she didn't fall. The air held her in place, thick and humming, like the breath of something vast and unseen. The girl inside the glass coffin did not blink, did not breathe, but her eyes, Elspeth's eyes, were wet, alive, and watching her. The book flipped open in her arms. A single page. The heading read, "The Right of Returning." Below it, a sigil she had seen only once, etched into the center of the school's courtyard beneath the moss. A broken circle, a mouth full of thorns, a girl kneeling inside. She stepped forward. The glass fogged as she neared, as if the air between them had begun to rot. Elspeth raised her hand and pressed her palm to the glass. The copy inside did the same. For a heartbeat, their hands aligned, and then the girl behind the glass smiled. Not kindly, not at all. Elspeth jerked back. Too late. From the shadows behind her, something exhaled. A voice, dry and ancient, crept through the walls. She woke too soon. The candles around the chamber flared black. Shadows crawled upward, spilling from the corners, like oil with bones in it. And the glass began to crack, not from her side, but from within. One fracture, then another, then the sound, laughter, but not Elspeth's. She ran, back up the winding stairs, the book glowing violently in her arms. The corridor writhed as she passed, walls pulsing like a heartbeat. She didn't look back, not even when she heard the click-click-click of bare feet behind her, not even when they began to sound like her own. She burst into the courtyard gasping. The air was sharp with frost, though it was summer. The statue of the blindfolded girls wept blood now, and around the well, girls stood in a ring, silent, still, watching. Each of them held a candle. Each candle burned blue. At the center, a space had been cleared. A perfect circle. An empty place. Waiting for her. Iris stood at the edge, arms crossed over her chest. "You opened it," she said. "You weren't supposed to. Not until your 17th. Elspeth shook, words caught in her throat. "She's me," she whispered. Iris only nodded. "No, she's what you left behind to become what we are." The blue flames flickered. "And now," Iris said, stepping aside, "you must bury her, or let her bury you." The book pulsed in her hands. It no longer whispered. It screamed. Ritual spilled from its pages like blood from a wound. Runes she didn't recognize. Words her mouth struggled to shape. Her blood sang with something too old to be remembered, but too familiar to deny. She stepped into the circle. The air folded inward. The girls began to chant. From the shadows behind the school, something rose. The other Elspeth. Her face a perfect mirror. Her hands curled like claws. Her smile stretched too wide. And her eyes, her true eyes, were hollow and endless and filled with stars that had already died. The chanting rose, steady and low. The language was older than Latin, more breath than word, more wound than song. It filled the courtyard like fog, like smoke under the skin. Elspeth stood at the center, her breath sharp and thin. Her other self, the hollowed one, moved with eerie grace, floating just above the ground, her limbs trailing like cloth underwater. She wore Elspeth's face, but it was wrong. Off. Too smooth. Too perfect. Too empty. The book in Elspeth's arm snapped shut, slamming so hard her fingers bled where they pinched between the covers. The candles hissed. Iris stepped forward from the circle. "She is the echo of what you abandoned," she said, voice barely above the wind. "The pain you refused. The power you tried to bury." Elspeth tried to speak, but found her voice caught behind her ribs. Her double tilted her head, imitating the motion a second too late. Her mouth opened, and from within it came Elspeth's own voice, crying, screaming, laughing, whispering secrets no one should know. Elspeth saw herself, age 8, in her father's study, striking matches just to see them burn. Saw herself whispering to her reflection until the mirror fogged with blood. Saw her mother's face the day she left, the look that wasn't anger, wasn't sorrow, but something worse, relief. The mirror Elspeth opened her arms. "You called me," she said, voice layered, echoing. "No," Elspeth croaked. "You fed me," the double hissed, stepping closer. "With every lie, every buried rage, every night you dreamed of fire." The circle pulsed. The other girls never blinked. Their eyes were glowing now, faint silver. Elspeth turned to Iris. "What do I do?" "You remember," Iris said. "You choose." "Choose what?" "To become," Iris whispered, "or to be consumed." The mirror self lunged, but not with violence, with embrace. Elspeth didn't move. The double wrapped her in cold, soft arms. And for one horrible, perfect moment, Elspeth felt everything. Every locked memory, every shattered dream, every scream that had never left her throat. It filled her, spilled out of her, drowned her. Her knees hit the stone. Her mouth opened wide, and the book in her hands began to burn. The runes glowed gold, then red, then black. The double leaned in. "Say the name," she whispered. "Say what you really are." Elspeth's vision blurred. Her body felt paper-thin, hollow, crackling. The voices of the girls around her merged into a single roar. Wind whipped through the courtyard. The statue split down the middle. The moon, dead and black, cracked like porcelain in the sky. And from somewhere in her chest, where the last warm part of her had once lived, she spoke. A name. Not Elspeth, not Asherah, but the true name. The one buried beneath the school. The one buried beneath her skin. And the world stopped. The name echoed, not out loud, but through stone, root, and memory. A name not meant for mouths, not meant for tongues of flesh. It moved like smoke, like bone dust. The air around Elspeth rippled, bent inward. Time flinched. The other girls dropped to their knees. The candles went out. The statue of the three blindfolded girls split fully in half, revealing not stone inside, but meat, muscle, red, twitching tendrils that pulsed like veins. And Elspeth's double? Gone. Not banished, not destroyed. Absorbed. Elspeth stood slowly. Something inside her had broken, and yet something older had taken its place. Her bones no longer ached. Her shadow no longer followed her. Her skin hummed with words no one had taught her, but she had always known. She looked down. The book in her hands had crumbled into ash, and the ashes crawled across her fingers, burning their way up her arms, etching runes into her skin like scars from a fire that hadn't yet happened. Iris rose from the stone and approached, silent. She knelt, then whispered, "You are the 13th." And behind her, the girls whispered in unison, 13 for the circle, 13 for the gate. Elspeth felt the ground beneath her hum. The courtyard pulsed like a living thing. Beneath her bare feet, the sigil carved into the stone flickered, then opened. Not physically, not visibly, but through sense, through soul, through the unseen. That night, no one slept. The sky turned copper. The orchard sang. And Elspeth was taken beneath the school, not with hands, but with memory. The hallways were the same, but older, covered in vines that whispered names and bled when cut. She passed doors that led to other times, one showing girls in black lace from the 1800s, another, barefoot children crawling through mud under electric light. She wasn't walking anymore. She was remembering. All of them. Every girl who had vanished. Every girl who had whispered their true name and shed their skin like a lie. They were all there. Inside her. Watching through her eyes. Speaking through her breath. And at the end of the hall, beneath the roots of the school, was the gate. It looked like nothing. It looked like everything. A circle made of mirrors. A hole made of light. And at its center, a throne. Woven from hair, bone, thorn, empty. Until she sat. And when she did, the mirrors screamed. The wind above the school howled. Trees bowed. Candles relit themselves in blue flame. And the 13 girls around the courtyard whispered louder. She remembers. She reigns. She becomes. Elspeth's skin split open at the arms, not with blood, but with roots. Writhing, black, bark-veined tendrils that burrowed back into the stone. The school shuddered. The orchard withered. The moon bled down the side of the sky. And still she sat. A girl once called Elspeth. Now something else entirely. Something the school had waited for. Something that woke when she said her name. Elspeth sat on the throne of thorns, and the earth sighed. It wasn't relief. It was resignation. Above, the sky turned the color of bruised fruit. The clouds knotted like veins, and the trees of the Black Hollow orchard bent until their crowns touched the soil, as if bowing or grieving. Inside the school, the walls shifted. The portraits of headmistresses long dead twisted into open-mouthed screams. Books burst into flame, ink boiling into smoke. The mirrors shattered in perfect synchrony, each shard turning black before falling. And still, Elspeth did not blink. She saw everything, not just with her eyes, but through the gate, through all the gates. The throne had shown her. There was not only one Black Hollow, not one timeline, not one world. There were many, each of them anchored by a school, each of them ruled by 13, each of them waiting for their 13th to awaken. And now she had awakened. Her body was no longer just her own. It was a vessel, a crown, a reliquary. Within her burned the names of all who had vanished, all who had obeyed, all who had resisted. The book had lied. It had never been a guide. It was a cage, and she had burned it. Footsteps echoed. One set. Someone was coming down the long, spiraling corridor. Elspeth didn't turn. Iris emerged from the dark, barefoot, veil gone. Her face was pale, streaked with tears and soot. But her expression wasn't fear, it was reverence. "They know," she whispered, across the veil. "The others. They feel you rising." Elspeth's voice was quieter than breath, but it carried like thunder. "Then they should run." A slow smile crossed Iris's face. She knelt once more, bowing her forehead to the stone. "What now, my queen?" Elspeth looked to the gate. It spun now, like an eye that had awakened, wide and watchful. Beyond it, she saw glimpses of other girls, versions of herself who had not burned the book, who had failed to speak the name, who had died instead of remembering. She would reach them, not to save, not to destroy, but to awaken. One by one, by morning, Black Hollow stood silent. No bird sang, no wind stirred, no one dared approach the school's gates, not the villagers who whispered of curses, not the families who had forgotten their daughters ever existed. But sometimes, when the moon vanished entirely and the earth turned cold as bone, the orchard glowed. Candles floated among the trees. Shadows danced without bodies. And if one listened closely, they might hear 13 voices whispering in a language lost to time. A voice among them rose above the rest. Not cruel, not kind, just inevitable. In the years that followed, the world changed quietly. Mirrors warped. Dreams darkened. Girls in faraway towns awoke screaming, their eyes filled with symbols they had never learned. And always, 13 candles would appear in places no fire should be. On rooftops, in lakes, in the hearts of abandoned homes. A new book had begun writing itself. And somewhere, in a place outside time and bone and breath, Elspeth watched. Elspeth waited, because not all thrones are made of gold, and not all queens wear crowns. Some are made in silence, in fire, in blood, and once they remember who they are, the world forgets how to stop them.